Marhaba Habibis,
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
and welcome to our first anniversary episode.
Jay, look at us. Who would have thought?
Not me.
All right, as you can see, I just went shopping at Home Depot. You should do the same. This magnificent power is now mine.
Well, I guess I would shoot the gun, not necessarily at somebody, but maybe shoot the gun and maybe, run at the person and try to disarm them. I don't know. I mean,
these are the same people who are taking the lead in demanding that the internet be censored, that ordinary citizens be censored on the grounds that they are ordinary citizens.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What's going on, Habibis? I'm Siraj Hashmi.
I'm Mujahed Kobbe.
And welcome to another episode of Habibi Power Hour Premium with the Habibi Bros. Jay, how you doing, man?
I am doing wonderful. Not too bad. How's your day been?
Good, man. I'm very excited for our guest tonight. A legendary journalist. We're going to bring him on in just a moment. But before we do that, Jay, today, as of this recording, is our 1-year anniversary of doing Habibi Power Hour. Could you believe it? Could you actually believe we make it 1 year of doing Habibi Power Hour?
No, I thought we were going to get canceled long before the 1 year. I thought it was probably going to be 2 months in. With my record on Twitter and stuff and knowing how YouTube and all these other places are, I'm really surprised that we didn't even get a strike. We've only gotten copyright strikes because of the vaccine song obsession.
We've gotten demonetized because of how many times I played the vaccine song, but that's just been about it. Like, we've been able to maintain our presence on YouTube and Patreon. We haven't been deplatformed yet. So Habibis, if you're tuning in, make sure you get in before we get canceled straight up.
Exactly right, because that's going to happen.
Habibis, we're welcomed by the legendary journalist and author of the new book, Securing Democracy, My Fight for Press Freedom and Justice in Bolsonaro's Brazil, Glenn Greenwald. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us, Habibi. Appreciate you joining us tonight. How you doing?
I'm good. I was in a car on my way here to make sure to get here in time, and I heard on the radio in Brazil that it's your 1 year anniversary. I don't know if that's true or not. So in case it is, I did hear that on the news. I wanted to wish you guys a happy 1 year anniversary and say how thrilled I am to join you for that.
Well, we never thought we would get someone like you on our show, and so it is a great honor for us. And we will get into some of the other things you're very passionate about, but we very much want to talk about this book, Securing Democracy, because obviously it unpacks a lot of your reporting that was done over the course of the last few years involving Operation Car Wash in Brazil. And you have been a resident of Brazil for the last, 15 plus years? 16 years now?
Yeah, just going into 16 years.
Yeah, so just setting the scene for us, for those who are unfamiliar, what is Operation Car Wash and how has that impacted Brazil over these last 5-6 years? Or even longer. I would say it's the last decade, since 2013, was it not?
Yeah, it more or less started in 2014. And it began in this very unglamorous way. It started in this midtown city called Curitiba, which most people outside of Brazil don't know and should know because it's a shitty town worth nothing. It's kind of like the Kansas City of Brazil. I like Kansas City, but if you don't live in the US, you won't be talking much about Kansas City. Right. And it started off as this kind of just run-of-the-mill money laundering investigation, where there was money laundering actually taking place through the local car wash, which is how the corruption probe ended up taking that name. And the money launderer, who they kind of closed in on when he was arrested and they had very conclusive evidence of his guilt, said, hey, you know what? You guys got me. I was money laundering, but you shouldn't be interested in me. I can actually turn over evidence to you of the guilt of the most powerful politicians and the richest people in this country. And I'll be happy to do that in exchange for leniency. And obviously they were very skeptical at first, but the more they listened to him and kicked the tires on what he was telling them, the more it turned out to be true, that he was actually the leading fixer for Brazil's billionaires and the state-owned oil company Petrobras and all of the huge construction companies that get massive contracts in exchange for huge kickbacks. He knew where the Swiss bank accounts were of politicians and countless parties. And so this probe that was really this kind of, trivial, coincidental investigation turned into the most powerful force in Brazil, because it started leading directly to the doorsteps of the most powerful people in the country. And the judge who was overseeing it, whose name is Sergio Moro, is this very young judge. He was, at the time 41 or 42 when it started. And he led this team of even younger prosecutors in their 30s. And the argument basically was, because Brazil has been running by systemic corruption for decades, that this was the new generation of Brazil coming to clean up the country. They weren't born into the military dictatorship that ruled the country until 1985. They were the first generation born into democracy and instilled with those values, took it seriously, took the Constitution seriously. And they became these folk heroes, these larger than life, almost religious figures, where Brazilians stopped identifying with ideology or party and began identifying with them instead. And, over the years, Moro grew bigger and bigger and bigger. By 2016, he was on the Time 100 list, the only Brazilian that year. Many years I don't have any Brazilians, but the only Brazilian that year to be on the list. And then it really reached its peak that year when its leaking of various accusations led to the impeachment of the center-left president, Dilma Rousseff, who was the successor to Lula, who was, one of the giants of the last 20th century. And then in 2017, they kind of got the big head on the pike that they had wanted all along, which was Lula himself, right as he was gearing up to run for president in 2018. All polls showed that he was leading all other candidates, would almost certainly win. They brought very dubious conviction charges against him, and Judge Moro very quickly found him guilty, sentenced him to a decade in prison, and that caused Lula to be ineligible to run for the presidency, enabling Bolsonaro to just have an easy path to victory. And as soon as Bolsonaro won, he turned around and rewarded the judge who had removed his primary adversary, Lula, with the most powerful and important position in the country, which is Minister of Justice and Public Security, made it much more powerful than it had even ever been. And so that was kind of the conclusion of Operation Car Wash, that the judge who imprisoned Lula ended up joining the far-right government that he helped enable.
Yeah. So before I kick it over to Jay, can you, you mentioned this systemic corruption. How rampant is corruption in the culture of Brazil?
Well, so it makes whatever corruption takes place in the United States look like, penny ante jaywalking. Most corruption in the United States is actually legalized. You hire, Chuck Schumer's legislative aide when he leaves, and you pay him $500,000 a year or more. And all you're doing is paying for his ability to call Chuck Schumer and tinker with some, provisions of legislation that nobody cares about or knows about, but that gives your company a massive tax break. So it's essentially kickbacks, but it's all legalized. And occasionally there's like the real kinds of corruption, what is that guy's Duke Cunningham and Duncan Hunter, those kind of people, like those weird California Republicans who got caught actually taking bribes.
Yeah, Chris Collins.
Exactly. Whereas in, or Bob Martinez, he was acquitted, but clearly guilty. Whereas in Brazil,
Bob Menendez,
yeah. Everything is done by corruption. Everyone knows if you want a contract from the government, you pay members of Congress or ministers. They all have secret Swiss bank accounts. Brazilians assume that everybody who's on the ballot is a criminal, and they pick the person who gives them the most. There's a phrase in Portuguese that Brazilians use called "he steals, but he does," meaning, yeah, he steals, but he at least passes on some of it to us.
It's just like the Trump adage, at least he fights, right?
Yeah. Like I remember watching this this interview once of these coal miners in Wisconsin, in West Virginia, after Trump had come to the state and said, "I'm going to bring back your jobs." And they interviewed these guys and they were like, yeah, we know he's lying. He's not going to bring back our jobs, but at least he's pretending to care. Whereas Hillary came and she's like, yeah, fuck your jobs. They're gone and they're never coming back. So it's kind of a low bar that people have in the US and Brazil for what they want from politicians. So yeah, it's a really serious problem. And that's why a lot of people across the political spectrum, especially in the beginning, looked at this Operation Car Wash like it was a very positive thing. It really did seem like, and it probably was at the beginning, motivated by a genuine desire to finally end this impunity that political elites had enjoyed for so long.
Yeah. Jay?
You're right. I mean, hearing you talk about Brazil and the corruption that way reminds me of Lebanon a lot, because I used to live in Lebanon for like four to 6 years, and that's basically the same type of view the citizens of Lebanon have of their political landscape as well, which is funny because Brazil is like the number one immigrant place for Lebanese people. They go to Brazil in droves, which is
actually no
is
joke.
A funny connection.
A good family friend. I have a good family friend, half Lebanese, half Brazilian. It's
yeah, no. Well, the vice president of Dilma, who is like this sleazy, just kind of like machine politician, Michel Temer, yeah, who, nobody knew, and he was just vice president because the Workers' Party needed these sleazy transactional parties to form the coalition, and then he turned around and led the impeachment against her, kind of a little palace coup. And yeah, there were a lot of people who were very confused. He looks like a vampire, and he's Lebanese, 100% Lebanese, and people were very confused. Wow. Like, why is someone who's Lebanese the president of Brazil? It makes no sense, but it's exactly what you just said. There is a big and influential Lebanese population.
Right. And to go back to Operation Car Wash, and at the end of it, like, what kind of impact did you see it have on Brazil after everything? Like, what was the main fallout?
Well, the problem, I wrote the book really for an international audience, not because I thought that people were dying to know about the details of, Operation Car Wash, but because there's so many lessons to draw from what happened, and also the way the journalism was kind of a corrective, and also why Bolsonaro won. And I think sometimes we can learn lessons by looking at other countries, and the lessons become clear because we don't have these preconceptions about them. So, I think that one of the things that happened was that Sergio Moro became such a gigantic figure with so much popular support that either every institution was petrified of him, including superior courts and the Supreme Court. They could not reverse his convictions, even when he was blatantly running roughshod over the constitutional rights of defendants or breaking the law, because they were afraid of popular unrest. The religion of Brazil basically became, Operation Car Wash is what we support, and anyone who gets in the way of it is going to be our enemy. So they were petrified of Sergio Moro. And the media, the media is notoriously concentrated in the hands of 2 or 3 or 4 at the most, very rich families with very homogenized politics. And they saw the opportunity to weaponize Operation Car Wash for political ends. And so they just started, kind of canonizing Sergio Moro. Every week you'd walk by a newsstand and his picture would be on the cover of a news weekly in very reverent terms. And the power that he ended up amassing was so enormous that he was infinitely more powerful than any elected official, even though no one ever voted for him for anything. And he existed outside of the realm of democratic accountability. And so I would say that my dogs hate Sergio Moro, so if I talk too much about him, they're going to
mention of him.
Yeah, they get very agitated. So, it got to the point where almost every major political event in Brazil from, say, 2015 until 2019, up to the election of Bolsonaro, was driven by this anti-corruption narrative spun by Sergio Moro. One of the main things that they would do is they also corrupted the Brazilian justice system. So it used to be that it was almost impossible to imprison people pending trial. people were entitled to be free until they were proven guilty by the state. Only in very rare cases could you justify imprisoning somebody if they were likely to kill others. It was a very high bar. And they just put everybody in prison. You know, they took these like manicured, coddled sons of billionaires and put them in, you know, Brazilian prisons are not nice places to be. And they put them there and they said, hey, the only way you're ever going to get out of here is if you sign this confession accusing these other people of doing things, regardless of whether or not they did. And they would sign them and then they would get these, you know, signed accusations. They're kind of like plea bargains, but they're just ways of getting leniency. And they would leak them at will to, you know, like Globo or whoever. So they had the power to destroy people's reputations. The media would just irresponsibly, kind of like the US media relationship with the CIA, they would just irresponsibly scream in headlines or on the lead story of the major television programs, you know, we got a big leak. This politician or this banker was accused of, and everybody believed it. They had the power to destroy everybody's reputation overnight. And so, you know, for me, one of the big lessons is that human beings can never be trusted with unlimited power. Once they start getting that power, even if you begin well-intentioned, you know, with a lot of integrity or noble ends, it will end up corrupting you. I mean, it's a cliche, but you can see it really vividly.
Yeah, Lord Acton, absolute power corrupts,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, but you know, in your book, you obviously focus on this whole trove of leaks coming from one particular source, a hacker. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of each and every single bit, but what's the most abbreviated version of what you found in your reporting of this particular Operation Car Wash and what you found between both Judge Sergio Moro and the prosecutors of Operation Car Wash?
Yeah, so there are some countries, you know, like Italy is one, Spain is another, where judges have this kind of mixed role where they're both the judge and the investigator or the prosecutor. But Brazil's system is like the US, which is the prosecutors are over here on the left, the defendants over here on the right, and the judge is supposed to be in the middle, maintaining, you know, equidistance between the two parties, having no conversations with either side without the other present, except in the rarest of circumstances, and being objective and neutral. That's the core guarantee of the justice system, is if you're accused of a crime by the state, you know that you have the opportunity to go into a court and have a judge who has no interest in the outcome of the proceedings adjudicate fairly the evidence presented by each side. That's the central promise of a healthy, functioning justice system. And one of the first things I saw when this hacker started uploading this enormous archive, I mean, it ended up being larger than the Snowden archive in terms of size. And the Snowden archive at the time was the largest leak in, you know, recent modern journalism history. Was I found the chats between Sergio Moro and the chief of the car wash prosecutorial team, Delton Dallagnol, and they were chatting like little teenagers over Telegram all day long, every day for years, and not, you know, about, you know, like recommending cat videos. They were plotting together constantly about how to construct the charges against each defendant to ensure that when Sergio Moro found them guilty, the verdict would be upheld on appeal. He would direct them what search and seizures they should order the federal police to conduct. He was basically the chief of the prosecutorial team, not in any way judging them. And multiple times as part of their plotting, we found them breaking the law knowingly, you know, getting around legal obstacles that were in their way to what they wanted to accomplish, admitting that they were politically motivated, they were desperate to prevent Lula from returning to power. All the things basically that they had spent years denying that people suspected, this archive demonstrated they in fact were doing. And the corruption was so grave that after the first week of the reporting, you know, when I had only published a tiny little fraction, an infinitesimal fraction of what I would end up publishing, his main media allies almost entirely abandoned him. Like one of the big center-right newspapers editorialized after, I think, the third or fourth day of the reporting that he should immediately resign.
Was that Veja?
Yeah, that was Estadal. Veja is,
okay,
you know, like a center-right newsweekly. That was probably his biggest supporter outside of Globo, and I lured them into my evil web by getting them to partner in the reporting. And so they actually, when they
you got that, gang? We got him. He says he's evil. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
That's going to be the Twitter clip.
Habibis, to catch a full episode, go subscribe to us on Patreon at patreon.com/Habibi Bros.
Or in the link down below. Steve's mom.